Hi there, I'm Miss Maisie. I'm a teen librarian with the Naperville Public Library. Today I'm going to show you how to make your own pom-pom cactus. Pom-pom cacti are a super fun, easy way to get creative this spring. In terms of supplies, you'll need green yarn, brown yarn, pink or red yarn, a pair of scissors, a small terracotta pot, school glue, and last but not least, a fork. To make your first pom-pom, you're going to grab your plastic fork and roughly 6 inches of your green yarn. You're going to take your green yarn and put it between the 2 middle tines of your fork, so it's about even. Don't worry if it's not. Next, you're going to take roughly 3 to 4 yards of your green yarn. You're going to take your fork and that long piece of yarn. I'm going to have you stick about 2 inches through that center loop and then around the back and kind of hold them in place. And then we're going to start carefully wrapping the yarn around our fork. So to create a pom-pom, you need a pretty dense bundle of yarn. And using a plastic or a dinner fork to wrap it allows you to keep a pretty dense shape without having to wrap it around your hands or cardboard, which can kind of buckle a little more under pressure. And you'll notice here my tines are starting to get a little bit closer together up at the top, so I'm gonna keep going around the bottom rather than the top. The whole point is to wrap as much of the yarn as possible around here. Again, that's 3 to 4 yards because we want a really dense pom-pom. You start to see it shift up at the top, just slide it back down. Slide it back down. And when you get to the point where you feel like, I just can't add any extra yarn to this, you're gonna stop. I'm gonna have you cut a section, leave a good 2 or 3 inches of tail. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna use this on my next pom-pom, so we'll set it aside. So what you're going to do next is you're going to take those long tails we had at the beginning. You're gonna pull them up to the top of the fork. I'm gonna have you tie a loose knot with them. There. And pull tight. And once you've got that first knot tied, I'm gonna have us slip it off the fork. And then you're gonna pull as tight as you can with that knot. We're gonna flip the yarn over. And then we're gonna do the same thing where we pull as tight as we can in a knot. We're actually gonna make that one a double knot. This is to give our pom-pom a center point. We're going to end up cutting around there. So let's grab our scissors, put the fork aside for now. So once you've got your kind of tight bundle of yarn, you're gonna grab your scissors and you're gonna start cutting in to those rounded bits that stick out. This part can take a little while because if you've wrapped it really tightly, it's gonna be a little hard to cut through at points. And you can see it kind of cuts through. There might be a few smaller loops left. You're gonna wanna just trim those, cut through those. And we're gonna do the whole thing like that, trimming around the sides. It can be helpful if you're having a hard time kind of getting anchors in. It can be helpful to just take 2 or 3 loops at a time and then kind of brush them aside and see if there's any more center loops that you've missed. And then cut those as well. I found those center loops can be a little trickier to cut just because they're so kind of densely in there. You want to make sure that tight knot we have, that is not what you're cutting. So if you feel like where it kind of puckers in, you don't want to cut there. Once you've got all the loops cut off, I'm going to have you kind of rough around the edges to make sure nothing's too loose and to make sure you can't see where that side tie is. Then I'll have you put out a paper towel, grab your scissors again, and we're gonna give this guy a haircut. You're gonna wanna trim till everything's more or less a uniform length. Something I found kind of helpful is to squeeze the pom-pom, sort of squish it down so you can see all the edges and then trim. This can get a little messy, which is why I recommend having a paper towel out or doing this over a trash can, because otherwise you'll be cleaning up green fuzz for the rest of your week. We're actually making 2 green pom-poms. So we're going to grab our fork again. We're going to grab another 3 to 4 yards of green yarn, and then we're going to grab what our remnant from our last pom-pom was and put that between the 2 center tines. And then we're going to do the same thing where we wrap the yarn around our fork. Something you can do to change up the side is I'm not going to go as far up on the fork this time. I want it to be a little bit squatter, in a slightly different shape, because no cacti is completely symmetrical. All right, we're going to do the same thing where we grab the sides, our side strings, pull them up, tie them in the center as tight as we can. Pull that tight, slip the bundle off our fork, pull it tight, flip it around, make another knot, pull that tight, and then double knot it. Again, you want it as tight as possible so you maintain good tension. We're gonna grab our paper towel again, and we're gonna start trimming. Once again, we're going to kind of fluff it up with our hands, and then we're going to start trimming. Once you have your 2 pom-poms, I'm going to have us get started attaching them together. So you're going to grab your school glue, and you're going to decide, first of all, how you want them laid out. I like the idea of having them kind of sprout off each other. I've also seen this done really well with them looking more like a heart pressed together, but again, I want mine kind of stacked on top of each other. You're going to add a little ring of glue up top here. And then you're going to press them together. The reason I want us to kind of glue as we go is it can take quite a while to dry. So we're gonna keep gluing as we go so it'll dry a little bit faster. You're going to set your 2 green pom-poms to the side to dry, and then we're going to grab our brown yarn. The brown yarn is going to represent our potting soil, so you want to grab 3 to 4 yards of it, cut off that 6 inches of tail, and grab your fork, and we're going to get started with that one. Again, line your string up on your fork. Give it about 1 to 3 really inches around to start. And we're going to start wrapping it on. I want this one to be a little rounder, a little less of an oval like our cactus halves were. So we're not going to go as far up on the fork. We're going to keep it lower to the base, just to kind of keep it a little bit smaller and denser. We're going to take our ends, tie them here, pull them as tight as you can, slip this off the fork, tight, tight, tight. Do the same thing we did before where we come around to the other side. Pull it as tight as we can, and then double knot it. Set our fork to the side, grab our paper towel, and start cutting the edges. My experience with the brown is that it is a little bit harder to see some of the smaller loops because it's a darker color. So you may have to kind of investigate and go over it 2 or 3 times instead of just doing it all at once. We're going to fluff up our pom-pom a little bit. And because this is also going to get glued into our pot, it doesn't have to be quite as even as your trimming it. So I find it usually takes me less time to trim this particular pom-pom, just because again, it doesn't need to be quite as even. Now we're very carefully, because they're still drying, going to take our 2 halves of our cactus that are glued together. We're going to take our pom-pom for our dirt. We're going to do the same thing where we make a little loop of glue. We're going to just press it to the bottom. Press, 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 squeeze together. Then we're going to take this and set it to the side while it dries, and we're going to make our final pom-pom. For our final pom-pom, we're going to make a tiny flower, so you don't need as much pink yarn. I would say you only really need about 1 yard to 1.5 yards. You'll take that 6-inch tail, and instead of that middle tine, we're going to put it in between these 2, because we're making a smaller pom-pom. We're going to do the same thing where we wrap a bit in, but we're only going to go around those 2 side tines, and then we're going to keep wrapping just around those 2 and keep it lower down to the base. And we're just going to do those 2. Again, you only need 1 yard, maybe 2 max. I'm not even, I think, going to use all of the yarn I have cut here. So I'm going to trim here. Because you really only need it to fill up about halfway up on those 2 tines. Then we're going to do the same thing we were doing before. Pull this around and tie it really tight. Slip it off the fork. Turn it around and tie it really tight again. Double knot it. Now we're going to set our fork off to the side. Grab our paper towel and trim. I think because this one's smallest, it's where I run into the most issues with almost snipping that center tie, which is why it's nice to have some extra leftover pink, just in case you need to go back and make a new pom-pom. I can't tell you the number of times I've started making one and had to start over. All right, we're gonna do the same thing where we fluff it up, and we're gonna trim all the extra pieces. This one's pretty small, so I find there's usually not as much to trim. So we're going to grab our pom-poms that are still drying, decide where we want our flower. I want mine up top here. Add a little ring of glue. And add it right there. Now you'll want it to dry pretty well before you try and glue it into your little pot. So I actually recommend taking a few minutes, setting this aside while it dries, maybe doing something else. For instance, we have a great platform called Creative Bug. Creative Bug offers you a whole variety of creative classes and activities to try. Once your cactus is completely dry, you're going to take your little pot and do a ring of glue around the edge. I recommend personally, I think you'll need more glue than you expect. That's been my experience. And then once you have that, you're going to stick the brown piece in and have that glue sit around the edge. You'll need to let this sit and dry as well. There are a lot of different ways to customize your cactus. You can use different colors of yarn. Here's a lighter one. You can have the pot, you can have your base be a little taller so there's more dirt outside the pot. Whatever you want to do to make it uniquely your own. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope you join me for another craft again soon. Thanks. Bye.